Okay, picture this. It's March 1945. The war in Europe is in its final, brutal stages. Allied armies are pushing right up to Germany's last great natural defense, the Rhine River. For 2,000 years, this river has been more than just water. It's been a sacred barrier, the one thing protecting the German heartland. And the German High Command? They're absolutely 100% certain it cannot be broken. They were about to learn that they had completely misunderstood the enemy they were fighting. So that's the big question, right? How do you cross a river that's basically uncrossable? The Rhine wasn't just wide, it was a myth. It was a fortress of churning, fast-moving water and steep banks, and it was defended by an army that was literally fighting for its own survival. Any crossing was supposed to be a massive, bloody, textbook assault. But what if there was another way? A way the defenders couldn't even begin to wrap their heads around. I mean, listen to the confidence in this. This is from a German officer's field notebook, written on the very night the attack was happening. This isn't some propaganda piece for the radio. This is what they truly believed, from the top generals all the way down to the guys in the bunkers. They thought the fundamental laws of warfare were on their side. They were about to get a very, very harsh lesson in American innovation. All right, so let's really dig into what the Allies were facing. The Germans weren't just relying on the river's reputation, oh no. They had spent months turning the eastern bank into a literal fortress, all of it based on a doctrine they had perfected over 5 long years of war. Try to put yourself in the German mindset for a second. On paper, their plan was flawless. The river itself was a monster, over 1,300 feet wide with currents that could just swallow assault boats whole. They had more than 3,000 reinforced bunkers, and the crown jewel, their legendary 88mm guns had every single possible landing spot pre-sighted. Their entire strategy was built on one simple assumption. The Allies would have to slowly, painstakingly build pontoon bridges, while those 88s rained down perfectly aimed shells. It was supposed to be an absolute slaughter. And right there, that's the heart of this whole story. Germany's greatest strength, their absolute mastery of traditional, by-the-book warfare, had created a fatal blind spot. They were so busy preparing for the war they knew how to fight. They never even saw the real war that was coming right at them. Their own expertise had blinded them. This quote from General Blumentritt it's perfect. It tells you everything you need to know. The Allies knew the Germans had seen these weird swimming trucks before, back in Sicily and Normandy. But the German analysts? They literally couldn't figure out what they were for. They filed them away as some kind of bizarre American luxury, a weird novelty, like a ship that just makes ice cream. They just couldn't imagine these things could be used as a primary weapon to break their fortress. And here is where that failure of imagination turns into a catastrophic intelligence failure. German reports figured the Allies had, maybe 50 to 100 of these curiosities in all of Europe? The reality? By March of 45, there were over 2,000 Dukos right there on the front line, with thousands more in reserve. The Germans weren't just wrong, they were wrong by a factor of more than 20. And that single miscalculation was about to cost them everything. So, what was this secret weapon that the Germans just totally misunderstood? Well, it was called the DUKW, and everybody nicknamed it the Duck. And this thing, it wasn't born in some high-tech weapons lab. It was a triumph of pragmatic, let's-get-it-done American ingenuity. It was the perfect example of how sometimes good enough is overwhelmingly better than perfect. The DUKW's origin story is almost as amazing as what it did on the battlefield. The U.S. military needed a vehicle that could drive on land and then just keep going into the sea. Ford said it was impossible in that time frame, so General Motors took the challenge on April 23rd, 1942. Just 38 days later, let that sink in, 38 days, the first working prototype rolled out. They basically just took a standard army truck and wrapped a simple boat hull around it. It wasn't pretty, but boy, did it work. And this, right here, this is the secret sauce of American industrial power. The DUKW was cheap. It cost less than $11,000 because it was built using all these standardized parts from the millions of trucks they were already cranking out. This wasn't some handcrafted, precision-engineered wonder weapon. No, it was designed from day one to be built by the thousands on an assembly line. And build them they did. By the time the war was over, more than 21,000 Dukes had rolled off those assembly lines. This is a number that German military planners, with their focus on small numbers of perfect, exquisite machines, could never have even imagined. America was building a weapon where the sheer quantity became a quality all its own. Okay, so the stage is set. It's 9 p.m. on March 23rd. Under the cover of darkness and the largest artillery barrage of the entire campaign, the first Dukos quietly slip into the Rhine River. And in that single moment, 5 years of sophisticated German defensive doctrine became completely and utterly obsolete. Can you just imagine being that soldier, Sergeant McPhersonson? You're a Scottish infantryman, you've been mentally preparing for a horrific assault boat crossing, and instead you just drive into the river. The American GI at the wheel isn't steering a boat. He's just driving his truck, except now it's in the middle of the Rhine. It must have been such a surreal, reality-bending moment that basically signaled a whole new way of fighting a war. And on the other side of the river, just total confusion. The German artillery crews are staring out into the darkness. They're listening. Their entire job is to wait for the sounds of a river crossing, engineers banging away on bridges, the roar of small assault boat engines. But they hear nothing. They see nothing. Their report is so simple and so bewildered. We have seen no pontoon construction. They had no clue the invasion was already well underway.
And this is the moment the confusion turns into pure panic. Imagine you're Hauptmann Reichert, a German artillery commander. Your guns are aimed at the river you're supposed to be defending, and all of a sudden you're getting frantic reports of enemy forces behind your position. Not just infantry, but what seems like armored vehicles. Your entire world just got flipped upside down. How did they get there? The bridges are gone. We haven't seen any boats. The entire German fortress doctrine just collapsed in a single, desperate question.
And this is why. The Dukes didn't just cross the river. They turned it into a 6-lane highway. At just one crossing point, 50 Dukes were hitting the other side every single hour. And they weren't just dropping troops off at the water's edge. No, they were driving right up the bank, going miles inland, and delivering ammo, supplies, even hot meals directly to the guys on the front line. There was no vulnerable bridgehead for the Germans to attack. The entire river had become the supply line. So what we're really talking about here isn't a battle that was won on the banks of the Rhine. It was a battle that was won years earlier on the assembly lines of Detroit. This was a battle between two completely different philosophies of industry and engineering. You know, to really get the difference, you just have to look at the vehicles side by side. The Germans actually had their own amphibious vehicle, the Landwasserschlepper, or LWS. And listen, by a lot of engineering standards, it was probably a better, more sophisticated machine. But just look at the numbers. They built maybe 100 of them. Total. America built over 21,000 Dukwas. The German LWS cost 7 times as much, it used custom, specialized parts, and it needed a highly trained crew to operate. The Dukwa? It used standard truck parts, and any GI who could drive a truck could drive a Dukwa. Even the father of the German Blitzkrieg himself, Colonel General Heinz Guderian, he knew exactly what had happened. He famously said, "We Germans perfected the art of warfare. The Americans perfected the business of warfare. At the Rhine, business defeated art." And the results of that business-like approach were just mind-blowing. Look at what they did in the first 48 hours. Over 15,000 troops, 1,200 vehicles, 3,000 tons of supplies, all ferried across the river. And check out that last number, 2,000 wounded evacuated. See, the Dukes on their way back to the West Bank became battlefield ambulances, getting wounded soldiers to surgeons in under an hour. That was just unheard of in a typical river assault. But this might be the most important number of all. Military planners estimated that a conventional, by-the-book assault on the Rhine would have cost the Allies at least 50,000 casualties. This ugly, clunky, but pragmatic swimming truck didn't just win a battle, it saved tens of thousands of lives by turning what should have been a horrific bloodbath into, as one general called it, a transportation exercise. The Supreme Allied Commander, Dwight Eisenhower, he came to see it for himself. Just 3 days into the operation, he stood on the bank, watched this endless stream of Dukows, and he immediately understood the massive strategic implication. Germany had no more natural defenses. Every river, every water obstacle that was supposed to slow them down had just become an express lane straight into the heart of the Reich. And that's really the ultimate payoff here. The big takeaway isn't just about one battle, it's about a fundamental shift. The Great Rhine Fortress wasn't defeated in the traditional sense, it was simply made irrelevant. All the courage and tactics in the world were bypassed by something the Germans just couldn't fight, an American assembly line. It was a total industrial knockout. Which leaves us with a question that's so much bigger than World War II. The story of the Duco is this powerful lesson in innovation, in business, and strategy. We often get obsessed with finding the perfect solution, right? The most elegant design, the flawless product. But the Rhine teaches us that sometimes a simple, cheap, mass-produced solution that's just good enough can completely overwhelm a competitor who is chasing a perfection they can never actually produce at scale. So the real question to think about is this. In your world, in what you do, where could good enough deliver an absolute knockout blow?